Hello, good morning. Welcome to Gaming Insight Daily for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. I'm Steve Saylor. This is your sometimes daily show of gaming news, accessibility news, or updates about my life. I have coffee in my Doom the Dark Ages mug today. Love it, love it, love it. A little bit of housekeeping. If you don't know, I have a Dungeons and Disableds show. No, that's not a category. It is the name of the show. It is a D&D / tabletop game or show where it's disabled players with playing disabled characters in sort of tabletop story settings. We have our second episode of our new series called High Noon of the Dead. It is an Old West zombie type story. Don't worry, if you're burned out about zombies, it's a different take. It's a totally different take, and it's a good one. This is a good one. So it'll be premiering at high noon, 12 p.m. Eastern today. So I'll be in there. We'll be doing a premiere. I'll leave a link in the show notes if you want to be able to check that out. If you have not watched episode 1, highly recommend checking that out as well. You can catch up for episode 2. So, all right, today's news. There's gonna be at least one, potentially 2 stories, depending on how we sort of how long we talk about the first story. But it kind of broke a little bit yesterday-ish, the beginning of the week, essentially. And it was originally reported by Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg, but I'm reading this off of VGC by Andy Robinson. Take-Two talks to save Xbox Perfect Dark reboot reportedly collapsed. That's right. That's according to Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who reports that the collapse of talks between Microsoft, Take-Two, and Crystal Dynamics owner Embracer resulted in an unspecified number of layoffs at Crystal Dynamics last month. Crystal Dynamics was co-developing Perfect Dark alongside, California-based Initiative before the game was canceled in July, and its developer closed as part of a sweeping layoff across Microsoft. The game, a remake of the classic spy shooters from developer Rare, was announced in 2020 and featured in last summer's Xbox Summer Showcase. According to Bloomberg sources, Take-Two was in discussions with Microsoft and Embracer to fund and publish the game, but the deal collapsed in part because the companies were unable to come to terms over long-term ownership of the Perfect Dark franchise. Representatives for Embracer, Xbox, and Take-Two all declined to comment. Microsoft confirmed a significant wave of layoffs this summer, which probably saw as much as 4%, or roughly 9,100 people, of the company's total employees across all departments, including gaming, that were affected. So this is an interesting story that kind of developed. We had thought that Perfect Dark was kind of dead in the water when it got basically canceled due to the Microsoft layoffs a couple weeks ago. We thought that Perfect Dark was essentially going to be dead. Or at least this version was that the Crystal Dynamics and the Initiative was working on. But this is the first we're hearing about a potential afterwards of Take-Two potentially buying the rights for it and publishing it. Now, people may think that essentially that Perfect Dark, it could have been saved, blah blah blah. Like why did Xbox is being stubborn and not wanting to give Take-Two the rights or whatever. Here's the thing you have to remember. Yes, the Perfect Dark game that was being created by the Initiative and Crystal Dynamics, yes, it was canceled. Yes, the Initiative studio did close. It does not mean that Xbox is not going to want to, at some point, make another Perfect Dark game. You got to remember, there was a lot of development issues that were being reported / rumored upon of the development of this game. Issues with Crystal Dynamics, that's why the Initiative had to be brought in, and other sort of studio support had to basically there was rumor that it basically had to start from kind of scratch. Even what they showed last year wasn't full gameplay. Apparently that might have been pre-rendered, or it wasn't actual in-engine gameplay. So this has been development for a couple years now. So it sounds as if the development of this particular project was not doing well. So, and again, this is not defending Microsoft in its layoff practices, in its business decisions, or anything like that. I can criticize them all day long. I still am mad about Microsoft laying off that many people to save a bottom line, and including canceling other projects. But when you take the greater context of what's been happening with this project, it's been under a little bit of, like, not necessarily that, like, as bad of a development sort of thing as what, like, say EA or BioWare's Anthem, or even technically even Dragon Age, for that matter. But there has been talks about whether or not Perfect Dark is even going to come out, and hey, it got canceled. It sucks that basically a studio had to close over it. I will always criticize that. It did. I don't think it needed to, but this already was in trouble, kind of, at least publicly from the start, or publicly that we've seen based on rumors and leaks. But also, yeah, so that in and of itself could have prompted Xbox to cancel this project. It does not mean that Perfect Dark is just done. Xbox still owns that IP. They own Rare. Rare was the one who created it, and they still own, so like Xbox owns that IP. Now, Crystal Dynamics is owned by Embracer. It is not fully, like, it is not owned by Xbox. It was partnering with Xbox to make this Perfect Dark game. That could also potentially have been an issue as to where, like, a creative sort of can clash a little bit, because you got Embracer wanting to be able to do that, like, to do whatever they wanted to do with Crystal Dynamics. Xbox wanted to do whatever they want to do with Perfect Dark, and I could imagine that basically it probably could be the reason why that there's been development issues. Is there could have been just some creative clashes with a lot of with several developers or several different parties. So you have that, and then with Take-Two coming into the picture and wanting to be able to purchase it, yes, did they have the money for it? Sure, but if Take-Two was wanting a long-term ownership rights over Perfect Dark, that kind of puts Xbox into a position of thinking about what is the future of this IP. Are they going to still want to be able to create a game within this IP, or do they do see value in that IP that they could do later? And so I think that's kind of where the back and forth, or the reason why the deal collapsed, or this potential deal collapsed, was because of that. Xbox owned it. They may want to be able to make something of it. And again, they could very easily do that. They could turn around tomorrow and just say, hey, X studio is working on like, we couldn't be able to get the Perfect Dark to work. We got another studio working on this, blah, blah, blah. Or it could be a few years down the road where they'll be like, hey, we tried. We're not going to try again, because we think that there's still value in this franchise. Or it could be that like Take-Two or Embracer wanted too much from Microsoft, or Xbox wanted too much from. There could have been a lot of stuff. Like, you got to think, these are probably three very stubborn companies. You got Xbox with Microsoft, you got Embracer with their own stuff that, you know, we've been seeing of them, of like buying up and selling studios and laying off a bunch of people. Like, they're not the best sort of stewards of studios, as it were. Take-Two, it can be a big of a not necessarily a bully within the industry. They don't have a reputation of such, but they do have a lot of clout, a lot of sort of power in that, because they have Rockstar. They have like, I mean, that's just a big, like, I don't even have to go any further. Literally Rockstar. They have Rockstar under its belt. And they potentially have next year the biggest entertainment release ever. And that's not just biggest game release, that's just biggest entertainment media release ever. So they definitely have a lot of weight to be able to throw around. And my guess is because of those three companies, I mean, if you really want to take Embracer out of it, just even Xbox and Take-Two alone, there's a lot of like back and forth that, like, who, like, again, the issue was support that was being reported was where was it? Yeah, it comes to terms because the companies were unable to come to terms over long-term ownership of the Perfect Dark franchise. This wasn't just to save the Perfect Dark game that was being developed. This deal was to be able to own the franchise of Perfect Dark, which meant that whoever would have owned owned it could basically re-release the older games, could be making new games, could be making new properties under the Perfect Dark franchise. and that is attractive to something like a Take-Two or an Embracer or even to an Xbox. Again, Xbox may have canceled this Perfect Dark game, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to want to make a Perfect Dark game in the future. And that's why they probably would have wanted to take hold on it. If it was just for this game and they just wanted a temporary short-term thing just to be able to get the game out there, then yes, then that would have been for that game, and they might have, and then Xbox would have potentially maybe created something in-house or partnered up with Take-Two again, blah, blah, blah. There could have been a lot of, like, if it was for short-term only, then yes, this game could have been saved. But because that companies wanted long-term deals with this, because they probably saw this game as sort of like a lost cause, or at least part of the deal, but the sweetening of this deal would have been who owns a long-term ownership rights. Now, I'm not a copyright lawyer. I'm not an IP lawyer. That's a patent lawyer. That there's a lot of confusing things basically in all three of those fields. But that is my guess as to why this deal did not go through. It's not Xbox blocking. It's not Take-Two wanting too much or what have you. It could have been the case, but there's a lot to think about and a lot of things to consider in the greater context of everything that's surrounding this game. This game was not doing well. That's why they canceled it, at least according to Xbox. And it could have it been saved by Take-Two? Potentially. But the companies involved wanted more. And it fell through. Now, granted, this did result in layoffs literally a week ago at Crystal Dynamics. And it did not involve a studio closure because Crystal Dynamics is still working on a Tomb Raider game for Amazon. So they can't close the studio. It's just, but now that cost to keep this game going or potentially try to be able to get another buyer for this game or publisher, probably kept people on. They probably kept people on that could not be moved over to the Tomb Raider team, or to whatever team is working on whatever project that they're working on. So and unfortunately they had to be laid off. It happens a lot more than you think when basically a deal falls through. There's not much. There are definitely certain times where, hey, finances are tied to that particular deal, and if it doesn't go through, those finances are in jeopardy, and also jobs are in jeopardy. It's just the way the industry is right now. If a pitch fails, there's a lot more ramifications than just, oh, we'll just try again with another company. No, if it fails, that could mean jobs. And unfortunately, in this case, that deal not coming through or not being the Perfect Dark not being saved, that basically cost people's jobs. And that's a real price that, unfortunately, of this whole thing. Yes, it would have been a sort of something that, or would have been a deal that would have been seen the long-term future of the Perfect Dark franchise. But it literally cost people's jobs because of this deal or this broken deal. So that's something to still consider. Now, on the other hand of this, potentially as a silver lining, who knows? Maybe the IP goes back to Rare, and Xbox is like, "Hey, Rare, would you like to maybe make another Perfect Dark game?" Who knows? Everwild got canceled. They're still working on Sea of Thieves. What are some of the people in the studio doing? Now, yes, some of the leadership had left Rare, but doesn't mean that potentially they might do that. Who knows? Now, granted, Rare basically developed it also with Nintendo, so there is a bit of that, but Xbox still owns the IP of Perfect Dark, at least as well from what we know. So there could be a silver lining. I don't know. I would love to see it. I would love to maybe see the best outcome for this, minus of people getting their jobs back, is literally if the rights go back to, or that the Xbox goes to Rare and be like, hey, would you like to make a Perfect Dark game? Because I think that would be the best case scenario. Because then Rare is also, especially for accessibility, because Rare has been a big proponent for accessibility and pushing for innovation in the video game space. So I would love to see them tackle another game. I mean, I love Sea of Thieves, but I want to see something new. I was sad to see that Everwild was canceled. I want to see them make something new and kind of go back to the heyday of Rare. Not to say that they need to. I would love to see them create their own original IP, and unfortunately Everwild seemed to be that. But hey, who knows? What do you think? What do you think is the future of Perfect Dark, of the franchise? Let me know in the comment section down below. All right, let's move on to the second story, which it's kind of it brings up something that I think definitely it needs to be talked about, especially in long-term or long-form games, or games as a service, as it were. And this brings up like an interesting discussion point I think we can talk about. This is by Chris Scullion again over at VGC. Final Fantasy XIV director Yoshi P says the game needs a major change in content hierarchy. Speaking to JP Games, Yoshida, so his name, Naoki Yoshida, so Yoshi P, said that in the recent times he's felt the game needs a notable shakeup in the way new content is presented to the player, because not all players are engaging with each new wave of content. I think there needs to be a restructure about how we approach the content hierarchy in game design, because content hierarchy is a part of the game's design, Yoshida said via translation. I started to feel recently particularly that the way that things are structured in Final Fantasy XIV no longer matches the player's preferences, and this is something that I started to feel after we entered this year. And so I felt that now we are at a time where we need to incorporate a major change in the content hierarchy and also the game's design. And this is limited not just to expansions, but to the overall development of Final Fantasy XIV. He added, when we look at the content hierarchy, we feel that it has worked well as it was up until now. It has been employed right back from the time of a Realm Reborn until patch 7.2, and has always worked well until now. But now I feel we need to advance more, change the content hierarchy, but also change the design itself within said hierarchy. It has worked well in the past 12 years, but now we feel, from our perspective, it needs change, and we are excited about that change and the prospects of changing it for the future of the game. When asked to elaborate on this, Yoshida explained that from the developer's point of view, or developer's viewpoint, the game's content is divided into hardcore, mid-core, and casual categories. And in the 12 years the game's been active, the team has been aiming new content at these groups of players. However, he says the problem with this has become that with each new content drop, only certain elements are interesting to each group, whereas in the future, the plan is to make sure that all the new content released will be of use to all players, regardless of their level of experience with the game. If we continue to follow this existing policy from the casual player's perspective, even though hardcore content is implemented in the game, it's almost the same as being non-existent to them. And on the flip side, from a hardcore player's perspective, the casual content is also non-existent. But we say to them, hey, look at how much content you've got to play. So this policy we had went well, but I could say that it went too well, because now we've created so much new content. Our players are telling us, oh, well, this content has nothing to do with me. I don't care. So what I want to say is that, of course, for the top tier players, we know that content tailored towards them is needed, and we'll continue to produce that content. And on the other side of the spectrum, for the really casual players, we also understand that the content is also needed, and we will continue to produce that. So we will continue to tailor content for both ends of the spectrum. What we're trying to do is to change this design so that we have content which can be enjoyed by everyone. So from the hardcore player's perspective, there'll be 5 types of content, and for the casual player's perspective, there's also 5 types. She said the step in this new shift in strategy will be seen in patch 7.35, which is yet to have a release date. Patch 7.31 was released on Tuesday. I'd really appreciate it if players could take the opportunity to play that content, and I'd love to hear their feedback, he said. It would be really great to hear whether they thought it was fun or not, or whether they have any specific feedback about things that they want changed. This new content that will be coming in the patch is called Pilgrim's Traverse, so I'd really love if players do check it out and let me know their thoughts. By the way, I also apologize if you heard like any high pitch sort of like ringing. That's not you. That's not you, and that's not your speakers. That was on the other side of this wall here. Someone left the door open to the outside to the hallway. So I apologize for that. All right. So this brings up an interesting point of discussion. This is something that I also felt when I was playing Destiny. In that when you have a game that is constantly and we only could basically get to this point because of how long these games have been in production. This is not for every game, because this is for the games that have been in have been going for this long. So stuff like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Destiny, Overwatch, Fortnite, games that basically have been around for a long time. Well, maybe not Fortnite specifically, but I think it's because there is segmented sort of types of content for that, and you can jump in a little bit at different times. But I think the core BR can be sort of thrown into this. But the idea of these long form games as a service or long-term game story of to kind of keep players interested. This is a new problem that we're facing, that we're seeing in that. And this is for this is not just isolated to Final Fantasy XIV, like I said, because you get three different types of players. You get the casual that are just jumping in for either the first time or only jump in occasionally whenever the mood or the specific DLC that interests them strikes, and they could be able to just play at their own pace, as it were. Then you got the mid-core sort of gamers that have been playing, but not necessarily playing every type of content that's in the game. I kind of equate to this in Destiny sort of being like, you don't participate in the week-to-week type content, but you maybe get the DLC every year or the expansion every year, and you play through that. That's the mid-core, because basically you're still continuing to keep playing. And then you got the hardcore, which is basically playing every single week, if sometimes even every single day, and they're always constantly like trying to be able to find new types of content, and they're always on the hunt for new content. You have those three types of player groups that the Yoshi P is talking about in this. And how the tricky part is, how do you balance the game for those types for those types of players when you keep advancing the story, or you keep sort of building off of expansion upon expansion upon expansion? Yes, there is a through line of from beginning to all the way through. I mean, like our mutual friend of the show, Elbel, she's playing Final Fantasy XIV, and she's still she's going through the content, and she still has quite a bit of ways to go, because there's just so much content in Final Fantasy XIV right now. There's so much to do in that game, but it's not necessarily like I think she's turning into a hardcore player, but for right now, she's kind of in that mid tier to hardcore. And so there's there's players that kind of jump in between the different buckets of players. So there is that. But what the tricky part is, again, is how do you balance a game for all those players? And the more you bring in, the more you build off of, either the more overwhelming the game can be to new players, or not enough for hardcore players. And I think that, yes, I think Yoshi P is correct. I think a new sort of shift in how they design a game like this and how you build off a game like this needs to be examined. And I'm happy that they are actually taking an initiative towards that, because we are definitely seeing that basically with patch 7.35, which doesn't have a release date, but it is coming soon. So I would be very curious to see what Yoshi P is talking about, what at least for their design, and see what they're going to do. Now, I've not played Final Fantasy XIV. The interface is a little too small for me. I know that there are definitely blind players who do play the game. So it's not to say that I know that that I can't play. But for me, it's just on the surface. There's just a lot that's happening, and that just overwhelms me. So I'm just like, I don't know if I'll be able to jump in and play. But if this new sort of idea entices me, I potentially might sort of jump in. And this is something that, again, has to be thought out from Destiny, from World of Warcraft. I think World of Warcraft is kind of doing a sort of an interesting approach, where the hardcore players are kind of playing WoW Classic, which is basically they're just constantly updating that and kind of remastering the older expansions that they did almost 20 years ago. So there's that, but then there's also just current WoW, which basically brings in either new players or blah blah blah. So like they're trying something different to try to be able to appease the three different types of players that they have, whether it's casual, midcore, or hardcore. So I think like that's an interesting approach. Destiny is kind of in that sort of, we don't know what they're going to do. They're still continuing on as if it's the same story, kind of just, even though the main Light and Dark saga is done, they're still trying to continue on with the story of Destiny. And in reality, I think that they should have just, personally, I think they should have just done the Destiny 3, and the thing could be said even for Final Fantasy XIV. Like, it could have been like, there could have been way too much being like, hey, we have to start over, or WoW could basically, they started over with in essence. They can continue on with WoW, and the more modern version of WoW is playable, but also WoW Classic is playable. So I like that they kind of branched off, and they're like, so they started over, but they still kept the original going, which is great. I think that's a great way to put it. Destiny, I think, is more, because it's more story focused than necessarily gameplay focused. I think that, like, they need that sort of, they're at that sort of pivot point, and they don't know where to go. Right now they're continuing on as everything is fine, but I think that they're a bit stalled in how they're going to bring in new players now that basically, like, are they going to entice older players back, or are they going to entice newer players? Right now, it remains to be seen. They're just still continuing on with the game as is. But for me personally, there's not anything that is enticing me to go back, even with this latest expansion. I don't think that probably sales would have done well. I mean, I don't know whether that could have changed. But I probably would think that it's not doing as well as, say, the Final Shape, which is the end of the Light and Dark saga that they've been building for 10 years. So they're kind of almost at that pivot point. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Final Fantasy XIV does a pivot point. Do they create basically a version for casual players and then one for hardcore players? Or do they try to still keep everything in game, but then kind of just try to blur the lines between casual, mid-core, and hardcore a little bit? So it'll be very interesting to see. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you play Final Fantasy XIV, or if you just are interested in these types of games in general, what are your thoughts? What do you think? If you're wanting to jump into a game as a new player, what is it that you want? If you're a hardcore player of a game, what is it that you would want? But also thinking about the other, like, types of audiences, what would you like to be able to see them do to be able to try to bring in more new people, so that you can also so that they can also enjoy the same either hardcore that you do, or hopefully be able to learn along with you as you jump into it for the first time. I'd love to be able to hear your thoughts. That's going to be it for me. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe and like this video if you do, and share this video if you I would appreciate it, because we could definitely use a little bit of a bump in engagement as of late. So thank you so much for watching, though. I do appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.